Is this thing on? Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And welcome to Tuesday's edition of the dceu Daily. On today's show, I want to analyse the motivations from WB about making a Flash movie. Why did they want to make a Flash movie? I also want to go back and look at all the decisions they made and talk about how curious they were and how suspicious they were and how none of it makes sense. Why did they decide to make a Flash movie? You're saying, hey Mick, they wanted to make a great Flash movie, man. What's the biggie? That wasn't their motivation. Their motivation was to hijack Zack Snyder's DCEU franchise once and for all and turn it into something that could be accessible to the mainstream audience. Ladies and gentlemen, and however you identify as, this is not a possible thing to do. The only way you can create a DC franchise that's accessible to the mainstream audience is to start again. Totally start again with a brand new franchise, as difficult as it is. You can't take something that has such little kind of mainstream consumer confidence and try and make it into something else. The Snyderverse is what it is. Many people around the world love it, but it's not the type of franchise that is going to be, I suppose, a pop culture icon. It will be in certain corners, but in other corners, the mainstream corners, they're never going to accept it. And that's okay. But what you can't do, you can't rebaggage it as something else. So their motivations were to reboot the DCEU. So when I heard that they were going to do this multiverse strategy for a Flashpoint story, I was very excited because they said everything would be canon. So anything you've ever seen in DC live action is canon. Well, apart from Val Kilmer's Batman and George Clooney's Batman, why is that? Why are they the only ones that wouldn't be involved in this canonical story? I suspect because they brought in Michael Keaton and they would need some kind of permission from Tim Burton, and Tim Burton wouldn't want those referenced in a multiverse strategy. I suspect that's why they're the only things that wouldn't be canon in the new DCEU. So some very exciting things were happening here, and I was really excited about it, but also some curious things. So first of all, they announced that Ben Affleck's Batman would be returning for the Flash movie because he is the DCEU's Batman. So then we all made, especially me, some assumptions. You would assume that Gal Gadot would be involved, Jason Momoa, Henry Cavill, even though his relationship with WB Pictures is as problematic as Zack Snyder's relationship with WB Pictures. So Andy and Barbara Machete were brought on to run this project. So we'll go back to Ben Affleck in a minute. What you've got to understand about directors like David F. Sandberg, James Wan, and Andy Machete, they've all worked over at New Line Cinema with Walter Hamada before. They are subservient creatives. Now, James Wan's a bit more of a free spirit, and it's kind of unclear who put him on the Aquaman franchise, whether it was Zack or it was because of his relationship with Walter Hamada. You see, I believe, and many others believe, that Walter Hamada was running the DCEU a lot earlier than we knew. We'll get back to that in a minute. Is Andy Machete a writer? No. He's a director. He didn't write the two hit movies he did. He's not a writer. He's a director. This is a studio-focused director. The reason he's been brought on to do this movie that's really a studio picture and not an auteur picture is so he can do as he's told. So he can do what they want him to do. Andy Machete didn't choose the writer of The Flash, Christina Hodson. Again, she is Walter Hamada's stool pigeon. So she would write a movie. He would sit there with her. and add certain things because he wants to make the relevant changes that he believes will bring in the mainstream audience and make this franchise finally a successful consumer-based thing rather than the auteur-based visionary DCEU under Zack Snyder. And so that was the plan. And so we look at bringing in Ben Affleck was very curious because Barbara Machete said when she went to him, she was surprised how quickly he wanted to do it, considering the problems he'd had over at WB with this franchise. So she was surprised after everything he'd been through with his alcoholism. But then something even more curious happened. DJ, who Des Jardin, that's his name, nearly forgot his whole name, is a VFX supervisor who mainly in his career has worked with Zack Snyder. So his kind of history in the DCEU is Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice, Zack Snyder's Justice League. He's never been involved in any of the other Walter Hamada-based projects. So why now? Someone said to me once, he's just doing his job. He's got no loyalty to anyone. If that's the case, why is his filmography that I checked out before I did this video in the DCEU just the Zack Snyder movies? Very, very suspicious how Ben Affleck and DJ agreed to be involved in this movie. And even at the time, as excited as I was about this, because there's no better VFX supervisor than DJ in the business. So that was exciting because we would get kind of Zack Snyder level VFX. And he's the best in the business, but we wouldn't be getting Zack Snyder. So you can have the VFX supervisor. It doesn't mean you get the nuance of Snyder using this VFX like a paintbrush. Very important to say that, but they were using Zack's people. Of course, they would need Zack's people to bring back the kind of things at the beginning of the film. This film at the beginning is the Snyderverse because that's how we left it. But let's not forget, when the multiverse strategy was announced, we were hoping that Zack Snyder's Justice League 2 and 3 and Ben Affleck's Batman movie would be part of this multiverse. During the build-up to the Snyder Cut, Zack explained to us how his 3 movies were part of an Elseworld now, and not part of the other movies that have been made after he left. He made that very clear. So this was interesting to me because this meant, if you're doing a multiverse strategy, why would it hurt to involve Zack Snyder in an Elseworld to continue and finish off his art? So Zack said that they saw Justice League as canon and not the Snyder Cut. Now, the problem here is, of course, when you look at Atlantis in the Snyder Cut and Atlantis in James Wan's movie, they're very, very different, right? Mira speaks with a very, refined English, old Edwardian English-speaking accent. She's got a very different accent in James Wan's movie. And there's differences. There's the speech things that Zack had them going in a bubble so they could talk. And these kind of things didn't happen in James Wan's movie. When someone on Twitter said it while he was making the movie, he goes, there'll be no speech bubbles or kind of, these oxygen things so they can talk. Now, actually, what Zack did makes physical sense. You can't talk underwater, right? Maybe the Atlanteans can, right? Because they've been underwater for so long. But still, it made sense what Zack was doing. So I don't think it's a bad thing, by the way. And it's something that Joss Whedon kept within his film, probably too expensive to get rid of it. So there's differences. So there is a problem. But obviously, any intelligent person knows that Justice League cannot be canon, no matter how much it makes sense to the narrative, rather than Zack Snyder's movie. Patty Jenkins told us during the marketing of Wonder Woman 84 that the DCEU directors saw the Snyder Cut as canon and not Justice League. No surprise there. What director would want to treat what he did as canon, let alone they obviously knew, and she obviously knew how he treated Gal. So she was never, ever going to make his movie canon. So it's interesting because BVS is definitely canon in Wonder Woman 84. because they use that brilliant music from Hans Zimmer, don't they, at the end of the movie? Very good. Because it brings a link in to the Snyderverse. So that was interesting. So even though I'm kind of indifferent about Wonder Woman 84, that was a good thing, because that kind of went back to the Snyderverse. So you've got DJ and Ben. They're involved in this movie. And you think, that's odd. So that kind of, as excited as I was at the time, I still kind of, it took me out of it a bit, because I thought, why are they doing this? This doesn't make sense. Why would Ben Affleck be making this movie? Why would Ben Affleck be saying, this is the best version of my Batman? That's weird, isn't it? You think that's weird, don't you? I do. So we've got this movie. They then cast their own Supergirl, a Latino Supergirl. Very, very interesting. Everyone's theorizing who she is and where she's from. And then another curious announcement was made that Michael Keaton, for the first time since 1992's Batman Returns, would reprise his role as his Batman. Again, very, very exciting, because Ben Affleck was there, so the Snyderverse fans should be happy. But then there were rumours that Michael's Batman would be the DCEU Batman going forward. And there would be only one reason why you needed another DCEU Batman, because the current incumbent wouldn't be there anymore. So then Snyderverse fans weren't happy. This is when they started saying you're replacing our Batman with a 70-year-old Batman, and things got a little bit toxic because they were triggered. Now, as usual, they weren't putting, their arguments weren't very constructive, but you could understand why they were angry. We recently found out that Michael's Batman will also be in the Batgirl movie. So some very curious decisions were being made here. Then very suddenly we heard that Harry J. Lennox was going to be in the movie and reprise his Martian Manhunter stroke General Swanwick character from Man of Steel, BVS, and the Snyder Cut. Very exciting. Then things got curiouser and curiouser. We heard that Michael Shannon and the lady who played Feora in Man of Steel, and Michael Shannon played Zod in Man of Steel, of course, would be reprising their roles. This is when things became a little bit strange, and I was starting to understand what was going on here. So the rumour was that in this version of the movie, Flash would warn Superman not to fight in the public domain, to fight somewhere a bit more quieter. So what happens is he doesn't kill Zod because there's no people for Zod to threaten, and he just goes into the Phantom Zone. Now, this is where it becomes problematic, of course, because I don't mind them changing that to a point, because I do think that moment when Superman kills Zod is a problem for a lot of people. But also the problem is you can't go back and alter somebody's movie when it's not your movie. You know, when Zemeckis goes back and, and has Marty McFly tread into Back to the Future 1, it's his movie. And, any changes he's made, it's up to him. It's his vision, right? But this is different. This is quite a toxic thing to do. Then we assumed that Henry would be in the movie. Then we found out, we heard a rumour from someone called My Time to Shine. I keep on discussing them because they're important. That the only element of Henry Cavill in the Flash movie would actually be stock footage from Man of Steel. And it would be kind of in television news format form. So we wouldn't be seeing any more Henry Cavill. So what were they going to do? Were they going to delete Cavill? Or just have him there as Superman, say he's still Superman, and actually not do anything? It's very, very curious. And this is the problem with WB Pictures. They have too many feuds with too many people. So you can't continue when everyone you've worked with that's helped you set up this franchise is not talking to you, or you're not talking to them, right? It's like when I worked in a shop called Toy Stack. I had this almighty crush on this girl called Donna. We were best friends. And as soon as I told her I loved her, she didn't feel the same way. and it was awkward. And ultimately, I left that job, right? And it's a kind of similar situation here, but a lot more ferociously toxic. Because WB Pictures have upset so many people through their decisions that there's certain people they can't work with. Now, Zack Snyder would come back just like that if they invited him back. But they're not going to do it. Unless Discovery do this, it's never going to happen. But anyway, let's stay on point. So as I say, the directors that Walter Hamada has brought on, especially David F. Sandberg and Andy Muschietti, are really directors who do as they're told and put out the film the president of DC Films wants them to put out. And that's obvious with the first Shazam, and it'll be obvious with the second Shazam. David isn't really a visionary. He's a director. And Andy Muschietti isn't a visionary. He's a really proficient director. We can see that from his past works. Not that he has a huge CV. Now, people have asked me, Mick, how can you be doing, not me, but how can they be doing this Flashpoint movie and have people like Andy Muschietti who have very little experience and are not very well known, and someone like Christina Hodson writing the script? And I agree. It's very, very strange. It's because they're not leading the narrative of this film. Walter Hamada is, because Walter Hamada is planning to reboot an entire universe, hijack an auteur director's vision. But this is not the first time Walter Hamada has done this, because I believe that Walter Hamada has been involved in DC films for a lot longer than we think. What if I put it to you today, and I allege, because I have no evidence of this, I'm alleging that it was Walter Hamada's idea to do Justice League. WB went over to him and said, listen, we've got a problem with this Snyder. You know, the mainstream audience are not liking this. It's so toxic on social media, we've got to do something. So they asked for his advice. And I would assume he suggested Justice League. Maybe he even suggested Joss Whedon, right? This is when the situation became very, very messy. So Whedon started being on the set while Snyder was still directing Justice League, while he was still involved. So you can see what was going on here. They were planning to remove him and drive him off, and eventually they did. So Walter Hamada, I think, has been involved for a lot longer than we think. You look over at Marvel Studios and they've become, you know, a pop culture icon. I don't like it. I don't like their success. I'm not happy about their success, but I can't live in denial. It is there. And then you compare it to what's happened in the DCEU, and there's no comparison. We're a fucking joke. There's no question about that. And we're a joke because of the people at Warner Brothers Pictures, because of Kevin Tsujihara, who was running WB at the beginning of this franchise. Once you've got Snyder there, you don't do Justice League. You make a public statement after the divisive reaction to BVS and the first Suicide Squad. You say, we believe in Zack Snyder. Zack will finish his DCEU story arc, then someone else will come in to start a new one. We believe he's doing a brilliant, visionary thing, and we want to see how it ends. That's all you do. You stand up and you stand by him. And you see what the audience think by the end of the arc. If people change their minds, Zack can obviously stay on. If they don't, then he just moves away. He's finished his arc. Everyone's happy. Someone new comes in. Now, we can always go back to the beginning of the DCEU and say, do you know what? Zack Snyder's not the kind of man you bring in when you want to make a franchise that appeals to a general audience. He's not. And they should have known that. But this franchise wasn't even going to be a franchise at the very beginning. This was just a story that David S. Goyer wrote while he had writer's block on The Dark Knight Rises. And then let's make a franchise out of it. There was no plan. Fake had planned this. Now, the thing is with Fake, he's got problems now. Because he's got Bob Chapek, or however you say his name, running Disney. There's so many controversies now. You know, you've got the people over at the animated division now at Pixar who hate him, who hate Disney, and you know he's moved a lot of Pixar stuff onto Disney Plus. You know, there's a lot of problems over at Disney, and the MCU is becoming very political as well now. So I think even though things like Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness will still be very popular, I think very quickly and very soon the wheels will be coming off the MCU. No question about that. And I can see that. But it doesn't matter. They've been successful for 3 phases. And they've had a couple of things from phase 4 that the public have enjoyed too. So you can't take away what they've achieved. It's a very difficult thing to achieve because you've got this franchise that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I personally think streaming makes the MCU more problematic and doesn't help the MCU. Because one minute you can collect all your films in your cabinet and your Blu-rays, and now I can't own Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Not that I'd want to, but you know what I mean. Same problem with the DCEU, but this is the future. There's nothing we can do about that. And so, was the DCEU a mess when Zack Snyder was running it? No, it's not a mess. It was his vision. And it was a vision many had embraced, but not everyone. And the reaction from WB Pictures was reactive, and it was wrong. So now we've got this Flash movie that's been delayed for 7 months. I've been told it's a placeholder date, not a release date. So you've got these new people now, Discovery, who are very creative friendly, which is a good thing, by the way. But it's not just about being creative friendly, because Discovery really have to restructure the whole company. They have to restructure WB Pictures, and they definitely need, as I keep on saying, a DC Studios. So really from Justice League, there's been one problem after the other, and nobody can take the DCEU seriously. In fact, now that you look at Zack, even if you don't like Zack's 3 movies, you can actually say, do you know what? At least the man had a clear vision. At least it was going somewhere. It was revolutionary. It was visionary. The man's amazing. He literally wrote text into Superman's S insignia. That's from Joseph Campbell about the hero's journey. The man's amazing. I personally love what he does. But you don't have to love what he does. You don't have to love every franchise, right? But Snyder's franchise had a direction, a clear visionary direction. It made sense. Man of Steel, BVS was the sequel. We continue straight off. After that film, we see Bruce Wayne's perspective of the Battle of Metropolis. Wow. Then we're 18 months later and we see an amazing immersive movie. Then we see this Justice League movie, which is on another level. And we would have got 2 other Justice League movies. Hopefully, we can still get them. So Zack Snyder wasn't the problem. I don't care if he's, controversial or divisive or any of that. He was deconstructing to reconstruct. That's it. He wasn't going to deconstruct Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and leave them there. You can see in the Justice League movie how everyone is the heroes they're supposed to be. But Superman has got a journey to go yet. And that's also exciting. That's also why we need to see Justice League 2 and 3. So what can we do about this mess that is a DCEU, that is the laughingstock of the film industry? If I was coming in now, I'd have to look at the movies they were making. And I'd have to make sense of it all. So I look at the movies from Justice League and beyond. So what can you do here? Well, the only thing you can really do because listen, I just don't believe going forward how the DCEU, and I'm talking about the DCEU without Snyder, right? Not with Snyder, but without Snyder, how it can go on, how this can be a marketable place for the kind of money they want to make from DC movies. So what do you do here? because James Wan's working hard on his movie. There's a Shazam movie. There's a Black Adam movie. I would literally, and this is a horrible, impossible decision, but for me, I would cancel those films. I would disband those films, and there'll be a lot of controversy, a lot of shouting from people. I'd say, we're not doing those, but we're not releasing those movies, right? We will release them straight to Blu-ray. That's what I'd do. We can release the movies we've made straight to Blu-ray, and people can watch them. People can consume them, enjoy the end of the DCEU. The DCEU is finished in terms of what happened from Justice League and after that. The DCEU now belongs to Zack Snyder. These films don't count. So you announced that Zack Snyder's universe is part of an Elseworld, right? It's nothing to do with anything else. The other parts of the DCEU, because it's a clusterfuck, have been disbanded, right? Or you can just create another universe for these DCEU movies. But the truth is, there's no point in that. There's not. Finish it. Let Zack Snyder carry on in his Elseworld like we want, like us, his fans, want. Let him continue with what he was doing. It's problematic already because they drove him out. He's gone and got himself other work. So who knows if this guy can even come back? I hope he can. There's certainly a space, I'm sure, and I'm sure Zack still wants to do this. I hope he does. But if he didn't, I wouldn't blame him, would you? So my decision as a new incumbent of this company would be disband the DCEU, make the films. The problem is, it's a bit problematic, of course, sending it straight to streaming or Blu-ray, because you've got to pay these people what they're worth. We saw how they reacted for Day and Date. It's a mess. Do you just release these movies? Do you just dump them? You can't really just dump them, even though I just said that. So what you would actually have to do without any choice is say, do you know what? Let's just make these movies and release them. And say these will be the last DCEU movies. And we're developing a brand new mainstream universe. But you see, what you should do is, you see, this is another way of doing Flashpoint. What you could actually do, instead of rebooting the DCEU, when he goes back, it's a totally brand new universe with new actors and new versions of these characters. It's nothing to do. Like they did the New 52, you could call it the new DCEU, right? I think I found it now. Because literally, I'm thinking on my feet here. I'm thinking, if they don't know what to do with the DCEU, you know, it's difficult enough. So I think I found it now. This is the only solution, I think. Do Flashpoint, reshoot the movie, but when he goes back, when he thinks he's fixed Flashpoint, he's actually rebooted the entire multiverse, right? Or at least Earth 1. So when he goes back, no one's the same anymore. They're played by different actors. So he comes face to face with the brand new DCEU's Flash. And he goes, who are you? He goes, I'm Barry Allen. And he goes, but I'm Barry Allen. And then Ezra Miller's Barry Allen vanishes out of existence. So then Zack can use his cast for his Elseworld, continuing from the first Justice League movie. The old DCEU doesn't exist anymore. The only remnants from that is in the continuation of Zack Snyder's Pocket Universe. We've got a new DCEU with brand new actors, and I think this would be the best way to go. By doing this, you don't have to cancel any of your movies you've just made because you spent a shit ton of money. You release them, you use Flashpoint to actually start a brand new DCEU Maybe that's their plan anyway. And I think this could work. So Gal is not Wonder Woman in the new DCEU. Jason isn't Aquaman in the new DCEU. They're Zack's Justice League. So they can continue playing these characters with Zack, and the new central DCEU, the new DCEU, can recast everyone. And you have a new leader, not Walter Hamada, by the way, but someone who understands comics like Bruce Timm. So all of a sudden, you've got the new DCEU, like they did the new 52, starting again. You've got Matt Reeves' The Batman universe, and you've got Zack Snyder's Pocket Universe. This, my friends, would be a brand new, refreshing future I think everyone could get behind. Then we can forget the past. We can forget their mistakes. Because right now, it's an utter, diabolical mess. This has been the DCEU Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives here on Movies TV Mad. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss this perfection. And I'll see you tonight around 5 p.m. Cypriot time for Movies TV Mad Live. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.